Well, during The Wizard of Oz, it was lions and tigers and bears, oh my. That's unless you live in Montana, where it's mountain lions, wolves, and grizzly bears. And without question, wildlife and predators like wolves and grizzly bears and mountain lions are a huge topic for livestock producers across Big Sky Country and really across the entire Rocky Mountain West. And joining us now is Trina Jo Bradley from Valier, Montana. And Trina Jo, you're a member of the Governor's Grizzly Bear Advisory Council. Of course, you and your family ranch in that Valier country, which, for those who don't know, is right along the Rocky Mountain front. Grizzly bears have been in the headlines for as long as I can remember, and they're continuing to grow in population. It's a serious issue for you folks up there. Just talk first, I guess, what it's like to try to run a ranch and operate a ranch, given all of the challenges of farming and ranching, and then you throw in a predator like the grizzly bear.
It's difficult. It's extremely difficult. So you have all the challenges of ranching that everyone that ranches has, you know, price fluctuations, weather, et cetera, et cetera. But then you have this apex predator that also lives on the landscape that you're not allowed to do anything about. And so what we've had to do over the last several years is readjust every single thing that we do. We've had to adjust what we plant for hay, because the bears love some things more than others. We've had to adjust how we calve and where we turn pairs out. The biggest thing for me as a mother is my kid hasn't been able to play outside ever in her life. She rodeos now, she's 14 years old, and she can ride her horse back and forth in front of the house to exercise her, because she can't just, we have acres and acres of land that she can't utilize because it's not safe. And I think that's what people really need to understand is ranching with grizzly bears is annoying at the least, but it's really not safe for us at all.
Let's talk about that human safety factor. And we've got a lot to talk about on this issue, and thankfully we have the time to do it. But when we talk about human safety, for folks that live outside of the greater Yellowstone area, they look at the grizzly bear, and partly because they're just uneducated about it truly being more than just this glorious wildlife species that they've learned or heard about in school. I mean, it, at the end of the day, is an apex predator. It's growing in population in the three-state area of Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. And the bears truly are being pushed out of the mountains down to where they normally wouldn't even ever be.
Yeah, so the population has exploded. I mean, grizzly bears are reproducing at an amazing rate, considering the biologists say they reproduce very slowly. So what's happening is they're spreading out to the path of least resistance, which is ranches and farms along the front, and then as they keep going, they realize all this farmland produces all these amazing things to eat, and so that's a really great place to be. So why would you struggle in the mountains when you can just go sit in a farmer's field for the entire summer and eat? And so that comes with a whole bank of issues, safety, damage, all of the things that people don't realize when they think, oh, grizzly bears are so magical and we like to go to Montana to see them. But some of us have to live here, and we have to deal with all the aftermath of them being here.
Well, and you aren't joking when you say the grizzly bears are in your backyard. I mean, we've seen videos on social media, we've seen them on television, where you see the bears, not just one or two, but an entire pack running up the highways. I mean, I've heard from farmers up in your neck of the woods, I mean, opening up empty grain bins and finding, you know, a mother and some cubs in there. I mean, they truly are. I mean, they're running down the streets in some cases in places like Valier, Choteau, Dupurier, other small communities there along the Rocky Mountain front.
Yeah, and I mean, what is there that we can do about it? That's the frustrating part. We have some hazing guidelines that we're supposed to follow, which is basically asking the grizzly bears politely to leave, which obviously doesn't work. And so we have all these bears in places that they shouldn't be just because there's so many of them. And to change the subject a little bit, because we cannot get them off of the endangered species list, that means we can't do anything about them at all unless one is threatening to eat me or my child. Otherwise, we just have to be like, oh shoot, it killed 14 of our calves. Better luck next year.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy to think, I mean, for folks that aren't as involved with this issue or even in the ag industry like you and I are and so many others across Montana, to think that the grizzly bear or some of these other predators like wolves or wildlife species like sage grouse, mountain lions, you name it, I mean, truly have more protection on them in some cases than we as human beings?
It's ridiculous. It's frustrating. And it comes down to it's really not fair. I mean, we as egg producers are providing the world with sustenance, and instead of saying, oh my gosh, we feel for you, we understand your struggles, let us help you in any way possible, they say you need to leave those bears alone because they're important, they're an iconic species.
Well, very much. I mean, but at the end of the day, I mean, they are recovered. And agricultural organizations like Stockgrowers, Wool Growers, Farm Bureau, the Cattlemen's Association, Farmers Union, I mean, everybody here is in a collective agreement that there's enough to have a viable grizzly bear population. All we're asking for is the opportunity to get them off of the endangered species list so we have an opportunity to manage that species like we do some of the others, like elk, deer, you name it.
Well, I think that's the most frustrating part. It's not just the ag groups that know that they are recovered and ready to be delisted. It's the state wildlife biologists. It's the federal wildlife biologists. No one that knows anything about grizzly bears thinks that we don't have enough of them. And that's the most frustrating part, is that every time we get close to state management, someone sues the federal government and they go right back on the list.
Well, that kind of brings me to my next question. Here just recently, the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has said, you know what, we think we have an idea, at least in Montana, to kind of maybe manage the grizzly bear population a little bit better than what we have. They've kicked out a draft environmental impact statement, a draft management plan, if you will, and of course that comes on the heels of lots of different conversations at conventions like this, of course lots of conversations with you folks at the advisory council, and really they want to hear from the public, don't they, Trina Jo, and try to get input from the general public, all walks of life on this management plan that I think breaks it up into managing the grizzly bear in two distinct areas in Montana, one for western Montana and the other for southwestern Montana. And you would encourage others just to take advantage of this comment period.
Yeah, so what FWP has done, after our council got done writing recommendations, then FWP took all those recommendations and all the public comment that came with it. They took the two existing plans, management plans that the state of Montana has right now, and they just basically combined all of those things into one new plan for the state. And there's nothing really different in there. There's nothing really anything alarming in there. It's mostly what they already had in place. But it makes sure to cover the entire state, because grizzly bears are spreading so quickly that we can't just have a southwest plan and we can't just have a northern plan or whatever, you know. So I really am excited about this new plan, and I think it'll get us a lot closer to delisting. But the key for that is for everyone to comment. And they are public wildlife. I mean, grizzly bears belong to everyone. They're not mine. Everyone needs to chime in and let them know, but keeping in mind that some of us live where grizzly bears do, and try to consider that as well.
Well, and again, like I said earlier, I mean, those of us in agriculture aren't trying to depopulate or let the grizzly bear become an extinct species. All I think the agricultural community, like we've done with so many others, is just have that opportunity to manage them appropriately so things don't get out of hand, and we can have that iconic species for viewing and enjoying if you're the general public, but those of us trying to make a living off the land can continue on with our livelihoods and pass it on to the future generation too.
Right, and it comes down to, if grizzly bears were under state management, things would be a lot easier for us, because the state where the grizzly bears actually are would be controlling the population. You know, we have a population goal, which we've met in 2 ecosystems. We don't need to have 1 million grizzly bears. Like that's not realistic, because where are they going to live? Right now, thank God for private land, right? Or else the grizzly bears would have no place to be. So what we want is just this population of grizzly bears that is managed, that we can handle. And that's all we're asking for. I like seeing grizzly bears on our ranch. They're really cool animals, but I don't like them on my front steps, and I don't like them causing problems. And if we can just take out the ones that are getting into trouble, the other ones are fine.
Well, last but not least, I mean, and we kind of have a working plan to build off of, because we've been managing gray wolves in a very similar manner, and it's proven to be a very successful way of keeping the gray wolf, another apex predator, in check.
Right, and the state of Montana has done an amazing job with wolves, and I think it sets a precedent for us that we should take the charge on grizzly bear management and show the other states that have grizzly bears, like, this is what we're doing, and we won't even get into poor Washington because they're in trouble. But I think we have a really good plan moving forward. You know, we have really good people in place in the egg groups and in the FWP offices and everywhere where we can make this really successful on our own.
Absolutely. Well, a great discussion, and thank you for joining us and giving us the inside scoop, so to speak, on the grizzly bear issue. A huge topic, as we've been talking today with Trina Jo Bradley, a rancher from that Valier, Montana area, right along Montana's beautiful and scenic Rocky Mountain front. Of course, one of Montana's also highly productive agricultural areas. As we've mentioned, the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks wants to hear from you as regards to the future management of grizzly bears here in Big Sky Country. And for all the details there, and to submit your comments and more, you can just visit the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks' website. Well, during this year's Montana Stockgrowers Association annual convention here in Billings, it was a great opportunity to catch up with cattlemen and cattlewomen from across Big Sky Country, as well as those agribusiness leaders who were in town to showcase all the latest and greatest in ag technology products and service they have available for Montana's #1 industry. And one of those leaders joining us here in Billings this week is Heather Malcom with Bank of the Rockies out of that Livingston country. And of course, Heather, you've been in the ag lending business now here in Montana for quite a few years, and you've attended your fair share of these MSGA conventions over the years, like we have here at the Western Ag Network country. Before we go any further though, maybe just talk about how you got started in the ag lending industry, coming from a farm and ranch yourself.
Well, I grew up on a farm or a ranch outside of Livingston. I'm a 6th generation Montana cattle rancher. We have a family operation that I'm still actively involved in. I really wanted to combine my passion of math and agriculture, so that really led me into the ag lending industry. I've been an ag lender for over 20 years here in the state of Montana, and 19 of those years with the existing bank that I'm with right now. It's led to lots of different opportunities. I've had the opportunity to serve on a national ag banking committee where we got to learn about agriculture across the countryside and how agriculture is different in different states, but our same challenges are the basic, no matter where you are.
Well, as you mentioned, you have been in the ag lending business now for quite a few years. You're the current chairman of the Montana Bankers Association's Ag Committee, and as you just mentioned, you're the past chairman of the American Bankers Association's Ag Committee. Boy, as we come up on year end though, I mean, this is a great time for farmers and ranchers to kind of take a look back at what we've done this past year and maybe what we need to do in the remaining waning days of 2022 to kind of wrap up some of those loose ends. I mean, what advice do you have when it comes to ag lending and what they need to be doing?
So right now it's the time of renewal season. So you should be getting your year-end numbers together, all of your income, all of your expenses, including your family living expenses. Whether you do it on a computer or if you do it the old-fashioned way, as long as you have those numbers, bring that in and make an appointment with your lender so that you have time to go over the goods, the bads, and how you can improve for next year, and also start the planning process for next year. If you're at the end of the year and you need expenses this year or different ideas of maybe you need to term out some debt, you need to get with your lender right away so that you can have that conversation to start next year on a positive note.
Well, and it really does get back to just having that open line of communication with your lender and not being afraid to pick up the phone or even email or text them with these questions so you don't get yourselves in a wreck.
Exactly. That's one of my biggest pieces of advice for ag producers across the countryside. Your lender is there to help you. They're not there to hinder you. You need to have a really good relationship with them and really tell them everything that's going on and not be scared of, oh, well, this happened or this happened. Tell them everything that's going on so they can help you make better decisions or change directions, or even there to provide other advice or education opportunities. They're your partner in your business.
So this year's been pretty tough because of the drought situation we've had, not just here in Montana, but across the entire Rocky Mountain West. And it's kind of put the damper on a lot of opportunities out here in farm and ranch country as we've watched, the livestock industry finally have some higher cattle prices. We've watched the grain industry finally have, some higher corn, wheat, and barley prices. As we turn the corner into 2023, I know a lot of farmers and ranchers out there are thinking, well, if we can get Mother Nature back on our side, is this an opportunity to take advantage of this current upswing, which doesn't happen very often, as you know, for both the livestock and grain industry at the same time, to maybe expand our operation, not just for ourselves right now, but building something bigger for the future generation?
I think it is a good opportunity, and again, it goes back to talking to your lender to see if you want to expand cattle or sheep or look at some more property, to have that conversation with your lender to see what you truly can afford. Lenders don't ever want their producers to get in a situation where they can't afford something, so you want to visit with them to see, yes, we can do more cows, more sheep, like I said. So you do want to go visit with your lender because this is an opportunity to do that as long as Mother Nature cooperates with us this next year.
What about land values and maybe expanding not just livestock, or, I guess it brings it back to like the farming side. Is there opportunity to maybe take advantage of a neighbor who wants to retire and maybe pick up another chunk of ground or two?
There is some opportunity with land values. We do see land values kind of leveling off. We saw quite an appreciation over the last couple of years, but those are starting to level off. There's a great opportunity. There's lots of different loan programs out there, especially for beginning farmers and ranchers. There's FSA programs, there's guaranteed programs to utilize those specific programs to help a new person get started or even expand a beginning farmer or rancher's operation. So there's lots of opportunity. You just have to be willing to go work for it a little bit.
So when you visit with your customers there in Livingston and you visit with some of your counterparts, not just here in Montana, but across the nation, given everything that's going on with the economy and inflation and just, gosh, it just seems like kind of a roller coaster ride all the way through. How is the optimism out there in farm and ranch country?
So agriculture is always the eternal optimist. This year we've seen a little bit less optimism. We've seen higher interest rates. We're going to continue to see higher interest rates. They're projected to continue at least until through the halfway of 2023, maybe a little bit longer. So as long as you can plan for those things, but in ag, we're resilient. We're there for the long haul, and I think we're going to be ready for that.
I think so too, and it's tough enough to stay in this business in the good times and even weathering through some of the challenges that Mother Nature throws at us. What advice do you have for younger people out there? You mentioned like some programs available through the FSA, but even so, gosh, it seems like unless you come from a multi-generational farm or ranching family, it's pretty tough to break through and start as a first-generation farmer and rancher, but it can still be done, right?
It still can be done. We actually have quite a few first-generation farmers and ranchers that we assist across Montana. You just have to plan for it and know that those first few years are going to be difficult, and if you're ready and prepared for the difficult part of that, then we see those succeed. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't see that, but the majority of them, we do see them succeed. They're the generation who will go for additional education. They'll come to Stockgrowers. They'll do different things so that they're continually learning, which is also a very important part of being successful, is continually learning in multiple facets of your operations. You just can't stay stagnant.
No, and that pretty much goes without saying for any industry. I mean, if you stay stagnant too long, you're just not going to be around in the future. I mean, so let's talk about the Montana Bankers Association and, I mean, what that association is all about, and more specifically to our audience, I mean, the Ag Committee, and you're chairman of that, and I mean, what you guys talk about, how often you meet, and really, truly, I mean, most importantly, is the significance of Montana's banking industry actually having a committee that's dedicated 100% to our number one industry.
So our Ag Committee is made up of ag bankers from across the state of Montana, from banks of different sizes. So we cover basically all the different institutions in the state of Montana. We meet starting in December. We plan our Ag Banking Conference, which is held in March in Bozeman. And at that conference, we have different education opportunities to, again, bankers need to increase their skills as well. You can't stay stagnant in banking either. So our main focus is that, but we also talk about what's going on in our areas, if anybody has any challenges, and it's a good network to bounce ideas off of, to learn about, if you're not in a specific region of Montana, what's going on there, so that our whole committee has knowledge of what's going on in the entire state, instead of just having tunnel vision in our own little areas. So that's what we do with the Montana Bankers Ag Committee.
And you said that big conference is coming up in March, right?
In March in Bozeman, yes.
Perfect. Let's kind of wrap things up talking about your experience as chairman of the American Bankers Association's Ag Committee, which allowed you to expand your knowledge, expand your expertise, and bring a little bit of Montana flavor to the national level, which, I mean, we've had a lot of national leaders represent us in the different ag and livestock organizations over the years, but same is said in the banking industry.
It is. I was the second person from Montana to ever chair that committee, so that was a wonderful opportunity. I got to meet bankers from all over the countryside, Alabama to New York to Texas to California, and learn about learn about dairies, learn about peanuts, learn about different commodities that we don't have here. And then I was able to tell them how we do things in Montana, about our cow-calf operations, about our grains, and all of our different challenges. Like, for instance, they really don't have a grizzly bear challenge in New York where we do. And so talking through all of those different issues that bankers have across the countryside, the regulations, going to Washington, D.C. and talking to Congress about different ag issues, it was a very eye-opening experience where I got to know a lot more about the country and how I can help ag lenders across the countryside.
Wow, what an experience, and thank you for representing all of us here in Montana on the national level. Again, today we've been visiting with Heather Malcom. Of course, she's with Bank of the Rockies there in Livingston. She's the current chairman of the Montana Bankers Association's Ag Committee, and as she's been mentioning, she's a past chairman of the American Bankers Association's Ag Committee. Very lucky to have her on our side here in Montana, and Montana's number one industry, agriculture. Again, her take-home message, whether it's here at year end or the other 11 months of the year, is to always have an open line of communication with your lender. Some pretty good advice as we say goodbye to 2022 and welcome in 2023.